gospel. Mr. Daniel Miller for the Texas Nationalist Movement.
How are you, sir?
Pretty good yourself.
I'm doing great.
Glad to hear from you.
Except I almost did the splits when I hit that slick spot
Oh.
back there. Speaking of water, I know where we could conserve some. Off that pool would be great. Let's get something out of the way really quickly. Doc Green, his water bill is higher than his electric bill because he has a water feature like the Bellagio in his front yard. And he's charging ticket prices to see it, so if you want to come help him offset his water bill. No, Doc, man, it's good to see you. And by the way, howdy everyone. Howdy. I am so excited to be here again. Again, you guys keep inviting me back, which means I must not make too many of you angry when I show up. We'll see if we can change that today. No, all kidding aside, I really do appreciate the invitation. And of course, some of you already know that our Cypress group for the Texas Nationalist Movement actually meets in this very room as well every month. So let me go ahead and extend an invitation to everyone here to come out and show those guys some support. Let me ask a question, because I can already guess how many people in here in this room right now are already registered supporters or members of the Texas Nationalist Movement. Well, good. Guess what? I can skip all the bull crap, right? No need for a pitch today, right? No, this is great. Well, so we're just going to play it exactly like that, because here's what you need to understand. For those of you that did not raise your hands, those folks that raise their hands right now are part of a supermajority of the population of Texas that are ready to see Texas as a free, self-governing, independent nation of the land. And I would love to say that my work is done, because after 26 years, yours truly wants a vacation, but we are not done. You see, it's not enough to have 2/3 of the likely voters in Texas that want it. We got to work like we want it. Yep. We got to go out there and we got to pay the wicked price to fight a battle not against one another, but against a political establishment that turns a deaf ear to the people of Texas.
Hear, hear.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. As I got to hear the candidates get up here and speak, my first observation was this. Many of you know that I just got finished during the primaries running for lieutenant governor, where many candidate forums gave us 90 seconds to talk about all the issues of the day. So my first observation is, if I run for office again and I want additional speaking time, I'm going to run for the water board. That's my first observation. But my second observation, so many of the issues that we face here in Texas have their root in our relationship with the federal government. Think about all of this infrastructure work that they just talked about, all the things that we need to get done that we have not been able to get done, and then realize that every single solitary year, Texas taxpayers overpay $103 to $160 billion into the federal system.
Hear, hear.
That's money that comes out of your pockets. It knocks an additional hour off Doc's water feature in Bellagio, right? But that's money that comes out of your pockets, that goes up there to Washington District of Criminals, and that you never see again. That could be here in Texas, in your pocket, being spent according to your priorities, your values, the things that are important to you, but we don't get that opportunity, do we? No. It goes away. It's like Hurricane Harvey hitting Texas every 9 months. That's how much money is being sucked out of our pockets. And so what happens? Because we don't have the revenue to take care of the things here that we need to take care of, what happens? they start charging us additional money. The state taxes us, or the county taxes us, or the city taxes us, or they jump our rates up. Why? Why do we overpay that much money into a federal system that does its dead level best every single solitary day to erode our God-given rights and liberties? Why do we do it? Well, the good news, my friends, is we're not going to have to do it for much longer. But part B of that second observation was I heard over and over that we need legislative action. We need legislative action. Well, guess what? There is one way that you're going to get the legislature to act, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. You see, the battle that we face is not the one that they tell us that we are facing. This is not an R versus D battle, although I think a case could be made that it is a freedom-loving people versus a neo-Marxist battle, right? Yeah. But really, when it comes to the issue of self-government, the fight is between the people and a political establishment that wants to maintain power at any cost.
Right.
Yeah. So I will, at the sake of being repetitive for those of you who are already on Team Texas, I'm going to remind everyone in here of what Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution says. It starts with the words, all political power is inherent in the people. Right? Yeah. You've heard me say it. Not the politicians, not the pollsters, not the pundits, but the people. And what we have here in Texas, as we have across all other states in this soon-to-be former union for us, is we have a people versus a political establishment.
That's right.
And the political establishment does what it does to deprive us of the things that we know belong to us, which is that inherent right of self-government. But you see, Article 1, Section 2 goes on to say that all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their benefit. Right? So, when's the last time you felt like your government was yours?
Never.
Been a while.
Certainly isn't now.
Well, Article 1, Section 2 is pretty doggone clear. Because you see, it reserves as an inalienable right to those very same people, us, the right to alter, reform, or abolish our government in such manner as we may think expedient.
That's right.
It is a pure expression of the right of self-government and, frankly, the right of self-determination. And my friends, there is a major disconnect between the people and the political class in Austin.
Of course, Article 1, Section 1 is also very important in this.
I'm getting there. No spoilers. Look, just because you have the Bellagio in your front yard. I love me some Doc. I don't know if you guys know. But there is a major disconnect. And I'm going to explain to you some things that you probably, that did not exist the last time I was here. Some things that have happened since I was here last. So, for those of you that remember when I was here the last time, one of the things that I have said for a very long time is when Texas goes on the ballot, it's going to win, and it's not going to win by a little, it's going to win by a lot. Right? You guys have heard that.
Right.
So when the people of Texas are faced with the opportunity to go to the polls and stare at a ballot, and that ballot says, should the state of Texas reassert its status as an independent nation, the vast majority are going to vote yes. And people thought that I was nuts. They thought I was crazy. But I've said it for a very long time. And this is a good one. for all of our hard data lovers. I'm staring at her, she does not even realize. For all of our hard data lovers. No worries. See, I was paying attention in the back. I was only pretending to sleep. This is what those numbers, this is what led me to that conclusion. 2005, when we founded the Texas Nationalist Movement, support for Texas independence polled in single digits. You guys know what comes next. You've heard it before. We've always polled higher than the approval rating of the United States Congress, which polls somewhere right above or below leprosy.
For good reason.
2009, Research 2000 poll, 48% support among Republicans, 40% among independents, 15% among Democrats. 2014, 54% Republican, about 49 to 50%, depending on how you want to slice that decimal, independent voters, and 35% of Democrats. That's 2014. And then this year, Survey USA polled multiple states, broke the results down by state. And here in Texas, you're going to love it. 66% of likely voters said they would vote yes on Texas. I can only imagine it's going to track higher now.
Oh, yeah.
But those breakdowns, 73% Republican, 54% Democrat, 53% independent.
That's awesome.
Now, what's amazing about that is that partisan breakdown isn't the number that should be exciting to everyone. What should be exciting to everyone is that even with a margin of error of 5 points, we have a big majority.
Yes.
Remember when I said we're not going to win by a little, we're going to win by a lot? The polling data shows it, right? It shows that that's what's going to happen, but this is what I'm getting to. Even before those results were released, the Republican Party of Texas added not one, but 2 planks to the platform, explicitly calling for putting the Texas question to the people of Texas. Now, think about that in context. The dominant political party in the state, arguably one of the more conservative parties across the Republican Party spectrum across the union, right? Holds every statewide elected office, holds a majority in both houses of the ledge. That party, not by 50% plus one of the delegates of their convention, which, by the way, is the largest political convention in the world.
That's right.
Okay? Not by 50% plus one, but right at 90%, just slightly under 90% of those delegates voted for 2 planks that said, give us a vote on Texas independence. We want a vote. That's massive.
That is.
It's insanely huge. So between that and the 66%, you would think for a moment, I mean, you know, I guess allow us to just have a moment and think, well, we should be able to walk this thing right through the ledge. We should push that legislation that gives us the vote should go through that pink dome up there like crack through a goose, right? Was that from a Patton movie? I don't know. That just really just blurted out. Oh, mercy. Anyway, but you would think, right? I mean, this kind of support is really unprecedented for a whole slew of issues. For any issue that they would tell us is a contentious issue, 2 planks, 66% of registered likely voters, including 73% of those in the party that it had 73% total, right? So that had the planks in the platform. I mean, that's massive. But understand that that's not what the legislators see. You see, the legislators, and this is not a blanket statement for all of them, I want to make that abundantly clear, but the political establishment does not see the will of the people of Texas as any indicator of what their legislative behavior should be.
Right.
True.
It's a shame.
If that were the case, then we would have actually been voting on this last November.
That's right.
That's right.
You see, when I was here the last time, Kyle Biederman had filed the Texas Independence Referendum Act. They said that he would be alone crazy. Nobody would touch it with a 10-foot pole. He was called every name in the book, just like we were. Deadbeat, degenerate legislators like Travis Clardy and Jeff Leach
Yep.
called us supporters. Everything you could imagine. Called us cowards, said we were guilty of treason, which, by the way, is a crime punishable by death. So don't take that lightly when somebody says that you're committing treason. Okay? But they called us every name in the book. Guess what happened? Kyle got a joint author in James White,
Yeah.
who was the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. And then he got additional co-authors. But the powers that be said that bill should not see the light of day, and it never got a committee hearing. Because the chairman of the State Affairs Committee, Chris Patty, said, stop. We won't have a hearing on it. Good news. Chris Patty got censured by one of his home counties and decided not to run for re-election.
Good.
What a shame. Hang on, I think it goes something like this. My heart is broken. Sarcasm, by the way.
Poor Chris.
So anyway, we could have had this last November. And think about all of the things that we could be doing right now to secure our independence instead of, dealing with whatever's going on in the federal government. Think of all the things that we could immediately have begun to address as a self-governing independent nation.
Right.
Let's not forget that Venezuela is dumping their prisoners on us, their hardcore criminals,
Yep.
giving them a map to the Texas border. We've crossed 2.2 million that we can count
That we know.
illegal immigrants across that southern border in a year's time. Last 12 months, over 2 million.
800,000 gotaways. Easy.
There you go. So, think about what that looks like. We're having to endure the destabilization of Texas because of the destabilization of our border, because we know the globalists detest the concept of the nation state. And if you detest the concept of a nation state, then the byproduct of that is you detest borders. And if you don't have borders, you don't have a nation state. And they're fine with that. But think about all these things, the Biden economics that we're having to deal with. Runaway inflation that's only going to get worse. All of this money being siphoned out. We're telling our military families to go on food stamps while we're shipping money to every country overseas for God only knows what.
Yeah.
We could have begun the process of extracting ourselves from that mess. We could have begun the process of turning away from additional centralized power in Washington, D.C. and the neo-Marxist doctrine that has permeated the permanent political class in the federal government. But we were denied that opportunity. And we were denied that opportunity because that permanent political class in Austin firmly believes that we are too stupid to govern ourselves. They don't want the power of the people on this issue to be heard. Imagine for a moment if everything they have said about the Texas issue is true. that no one believes this. No one honestly believes that Texas should become a self-governing independent nation. Imagine if that was true. Imagine if what they're saying, that all we are is just a very vocal small minority, fringe. Why don't they just put it on the ballot and prove it? Why don't they just put it on the ballot and shut us up and prove it? If it is as they say, it would never get more than 5%. And you know, the way that we wrote the bill, it won't cost them an additional dollar to add it to the ballot. Not one single dollar to put the question to the people of Texas. So why don't they do it? Because they know what we know. When it goes to the people will choose freedom and independence over status quo and Marxism every single day of the week and twice on Sundays. So here's our opportunity, folks. We know how they operate. We know they love to turn a deaf ear. We shut down that Capitol switchboard more times than I can count. We held demonstrations in their district offices. We did all these things. But if you want them to hear you, I'm going to let you in on the secret that I have learned in dealing with these legislators for all these years. Do you want to know it?
Yes.
Are you sure? Because when you hear it, when I tell it to you, you're going to think two things. You're going to think, number one, that's simple. And number two, I'm not sure how to do that. It is possible to hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously in your brain. People do it all the time. Think about when they're going to go and pull the people that are going to have to go vote for Beto O'Rourke. I mean, it's, you know, it's a thing, right? Yeah. Cognitive dissonance. There you go. That's a Bellagio kind of word.
All ears.
But you sure? Are you getting ready to take notes? Is that what's happening here?
It's on sign-in sheet.
Okay, don't write on the sign-in sheet. I don't think they like that very much unless you're actually signing in.
Okay.
So you want to know the secret?
All ears.
Here's the thing. With the exception of very few, the electeds in Austin do not operate on principle.
Truth.
That's only part of it. Don't anybody hold me to account, because let's be honest, that's not much of a newsflash, is it? But what does motivate them is political expediency. They will sacrifice any principle they may have for political expediency. And I draw your attention as proof to the first interaction that our organization ever had with now Governor Greg Abbott. You see, several sessions back when David Dewhurst was Lieutenant Governor, he actually took a meeting and wanted to discuss championing a vote on Texas independence. Now, let's be honest, those of you who remember David Dewhurst, none of us had him on our Texas bingo cards, right? He was not a player in any shape, form, or fashion, and no one was as surprised as we were. And so after some lengthy conversations, he said, I'm in, I want to push it, I want to do what I can to help, but I want to get a buy-in from the Attorney General. He said, because I know that we're going to have some sort of legal fight, and he says, I want to make sure that we are in lockstep on this. So we have the meeting, I'm on cloud nine, because that means it's beginning to look a lot like I'm closer to vacation. You understand? Days turn into a week, and then 2 weeks, and then I hear from Dewhurst. We're not going to be able to move forward because we couldn't get a buy-in from Abbott. Interesting. You know, because he was the Attorney General at the time. I said, interesting. What was the objection? And of course, I'm scrambling. Is it constitutionality? We've got experts to cover that. Is it, any statutory issues, concerns? We've got people to cover that. What is it from a principle standpoint or a legal standpoint that is the objection? They said none of that. That wasn't his problem. You see, Rick Perry was getting ready to leave office, and Abbott was beginning to spin up his campaign machinery behind the scenes to run for governor. And so his objection was not one based on principle, not based on any type of principle whatsoever. He didn't object on constitutional grounds, historical grounds, statutory grounds, none of it. It was, his concern was how it would affect his chances in a governor's race. Not principle, political expediency. Right? What is the number one fear that politicians have? The number one.
Losing power.
Getting voted out of office. I mean, that's why they run so hard for re-election, right? No offense to anyone here running for re-election, but it's just the way that people get. We're competitive in our spirit. But at those levels, like we see in Austin, they're uber competitive. I ran for state representative in 2012 against a multi-year incumbent who switched from Democrat to Republican and continued to vote like a Democrat. I ran against him. I raised and spent $10,000. To beat me, he had to raise and spend $300,000. Do you know why? He didn't have some sort of burning policy that he wanted to make sure he could get across the finish line. He was one session away from being vested in the state retirement system.
Yeah.
$300,000 for him was an investment in his future. You understand?
That's right, because that retirement money is big money.
Right. So, well, then he went, sidebar everyone, he got hired as an advisor to the new Speaker of the House, Dave Thielen. So not only does he draw his state pension, but he's also getting additional payroll, but that's a whole other topic, right? Yeah. So here's the other part of what I was saying. They don't operate from principle, they operate from political expediency. So if you want to get something done, what do you have to do? You have to make it politically expedient. And appeal to their principles never works. Or, not never, that's an absolute. It works in some instances, but in a very limited number. You can appeal to reason, right? You try to rationalize these things. Like you, I'm a data wonk. We've hit legislators with more data than you could possibly imagine. That doesn't move the ball forward. The only thing that will advance an agenda, especially one like ours, is to make it politically expedient, to leverage their fear of re-election, to help them understand that if they do not support our right under Article 1, Section 2, right, an inalienable right, then there will be a price to be paid at the ballot box. That's okay, I appreciate that. That was nice. But that's how we win. You see, if we want a Texas vote, or frankly anything, any of these things addressed, we have to stop appealing to their principles. We can operate on principles. We're the people. We're allowed to do that. But appealing to their principles gets us nowhere. But making it politically expedient does. Now, you may think, to circle right back to the very beginning, you may think that with all of those things that we have, the planks, the polling data, that it would be the politically expedient thing for them to do, right? But here's the thing. It's not politically expedient to them unless they see it. You see, planks to them are just words on paper. Polling data to them is just numbers on paper. What matters is how many of their constituents are willing to cause them grief or elevate them onto a pedestal, depending on their position on this issue. And look, I'm getting into sort of the pragmatic aspect of this because most of you folks are already on Team Texan. And you want actionable stuff today, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to tell you. Here's your actions. Knowing that they operate from political expediency, the key thing that we must do moving forward, we don't need to debate Texan. First and foremost, there's not time for that. Number two, it's not the time for that. That only comes when we get the vote. Let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's just focus on the main thing, and that is securing your rights under Article 1, Section 2. You see, you can debate the Texan issue all you want to right now, but it is solely academic. Because until we have the ability to vote on it, we're just a dadgum Reddit thread, right? Or we're arguing in the comment section on Facebook. That doesn't do anything. It may make us feel better, but that doesn't get the job done. The first thing that we have to do is we have to get the vote, and we have to focus on what it takes to get us the vote. And here's what you got to do today. Not wait till the beginning of the legislative session, not wait till the general election, but today. We all pretty well know how most of these districts are going to end up in the general election, don't we? These state reps and state senators. We like to pretend like they're competitive, but if you look at those gerrymandered maps that came out from the legislative session, there are very few competitive districts, right? The competition was really in the primaries.
Yep.
So we have a pretty good idea, all of us here, within a range of certainty, who is going to win that race in the general election for state senate and state rep. So today, you have to call them both. You're going to start a process today that is going to turn you into the biggest nuisance or the biggest cheerleader they have. And you're going to call them, not email, but call. You get bonus points for visiting, by the way, just saying. Pick up your gold star on the way out. But you have to ask them the question: will you sign on to the legislation in the next session that will give Texans a vote on Texan? Simple.
What about the Texas First Pledge?
Well, that's a whole other topic, but we're talking about this. We'll talk about that later during Q&A if you'd like to. But this is what we want. As a constituent of this person or potential constituent, for those that are getting brand new ones, you have the absolute right to ask that question and demand a straight answer, and not have some kind of mealy-mouthed nonsense thrown back at you. Well, I really need to see. It's like, wait a minute. No, that's not how this works. You see, I draw your attention back to Article 1, Section 2. It says that the people have an inalienable right to alter, reform, or abolish their government in such manner as they may think expedient. So let's examine that for a second. Let's look at the word inalienable. Think about what other rights you consider inalienable. How about the right to worship according to the dictates of your conscience? How about your freedom of speech? How about your right to keep and bear arms?
Oh, yeah.
You would consider those inalienable rights, wouldn't you? So what does that mean when they're inalienable? Where do they come from?
God.
And so when they deprive you of an inalienable right, they are setting themselves up above
God. That's right.
and you have to treat it that way. You see, there's a lot of talk about those rights that I just mentioned, but very few people talk about that fundamental right of self-government. And even when they do, they don't treat it as such. So when your elected official tells you that they don't support your right to vote on this issue, what they're telling you is when they put their hand on the Bible and jammed their other hand up in the air and swore an oath to protect and defend that Constitution, that they lied.
Right.
They're telling you, when they say no, that they lied and they broke their oath. Maybe they don't understand. You can help them. You can help them understand how important it is, right? Inalienable right. And I'm going to tell you right now, little inside baseball. The vast majority of the elected officials here in Texas do not even know what Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution says.
That's the truth. Yeah.
In fact, in that meeting with David Dewhurst, when I quoted Article 1, Section 2 to him verbatim, he stood up from the table like an ant was biting him on his butt, ran over to the bookcase behind his desk, grabbed his copy of the Texas Constitution. It's not a pocket Constitution, right? You've seen our Constitution. He grabbed his copy of the Texas Constitution. And he opened it up to the Texas Bill of Rights, Article 1, Article 1, Sections 1 and 2. And he says, okay, say that again. And just like we were in grade school, he was moving his finger along the line, fact-checking me. And then he looked up and he says, you're right. Now, imagine this. He had just come off of the floor of the Senate administering the oath of office to all the new senators.
Wow. They never read it either.
He didn't know what it said. He had a meeting next, after hours, with 5 other state senators. L. Tife was one, there was several others. Tommy Williams, back when he was in the Senate. And they come in, and the first thing out of his mouth was, guys, sit down. You've got to see this. And he's got it open, and he's showing it. Like he found Waldo. They don't know. And sometimes you have to teach them. So here's what we got to do, folks. Now you know, and you know what you have to do, and that's only the first action that you need to take. You see, because it's not a one and done kind of scenario, we don't need to shut down their switchboards. We need to flood their offices. We need to be there in their district offices. We have to be as ubiquitous as we possibly can. And I'm going to give you something to aspire to. Here, on September the 11th of every year, we commemorate the attacks that happened on the World Trade Center. But you see, halfway around the world, on September the 11th, in Barcelona, in Spain, or as they would love to call it, Catalonia, somewhere between 1 million and 1.5 million people take to the streets and march in support of the independence of Catalonia, something they have been fighting for hundreds of years. And it is that pressure, that show of strength, that has led the independence movement in Catalonia, has kept them alive under cruel, cruel repression. We don't face that sort of repression here yet. Yet.
It's coming.
We don't. We have an opportunity now to do something about it.
Yes.
We have an opportunity presented to us that we could have had back in November of last year. And if we pour it on hard and we lay it all out there, that we can have that opportunity sooner rather than later. I want my 27th year to be my final year. I want it to be that year that we gain Texas independence. I want it to be the year that we secure the blessings of liberty for the people that come after us. I want it to be the year that we as Texans stand up and say to the world in one clear, loud voice that Texas is a free, self-governing, sovereign, independent nation among nations. That we reclaim our right of prosperity. We uphold the belief in a constitutional republic, and we believe that rights come from God and not government. I want to be an example to the rest of the world of what a free, independent people can do, and a sign to the people in the other states that it doesn't have to be this way, that they don't have to endure like they do. So, my friends, as we leave today, if you're already in the Texas Nationalist Movement, I thank you. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your sacrifice. I thank you for being a part of the majority. Guys, how does it feel to be on the winning team? And I would hope that today, that first, thank you for coming out and showing your support. But I would love if some of you today, if maybe this was a day for you to recommit, re-strengthen, increase your engagement, become a leader in the organization, we welcome you. We want you to do that. But if today is your first day to hear about Texas, to hear about the T&M, if some of this has kind of blown you away, like where in the world did this come from? First and foremost, you're welcome. But all kidding aside, today is your day to make your decision. Today is your line in the sand moment. And I know that those of you that are brand new have a million questions, and I just leave you with a question of my own. And it's simply this. If Texas was already a self-governing independent nation among nations, if we had control over our own border policy and immigration policy, we had our own military, our own currency, we cut our own trade deals, our own travel deals, we had our own embassies and passports, we had everything that over 200 self-governing independent nations have around the world. And instead of talking about Texas, we were going to determine whether or not Texas should give all that up and join the Union. Knowing what you know about the federal government today, would you vote to join the Union?
Hell no!
Well, if your answer is no, then you know where you got to go next. It's that table right back over there. Because it's going to take all of us to get this done. And so with that, I leave you with the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Two rules. Questions must end in a question mark.
Did you tell me what Article 1, Section 1 says?
Yes, Texas is a free and independent state subject only to the Constitution of the United States. Right? And it says that the perpetuity of the Union depends on the right of local self-government unimpaired to all the states.
Unimpaired?
Unimpaired. According to Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution, the Union is already broken. We haven't done anything. Right. They broke the deal. They broke the contract.
Now that is Texas law, my friend.
That's what I hear.
Why they choose to ignore it, I do not understand.
Well, maybe we need to just get Dewhurst to go around with his book and show people.
Yes, ma'am.
Since you want the legislature and the rest of the state to hear us, and you want the world to hear us, what about if instead of celebrating Texas joining the Union in March, why don't we mourn it?
Well, you're talking about July the 4th because that's when it became official. That's when Texas joined the Union. And yes, at the Miller household, that is a day of sackcloth and ashes. But Texas Independence Day is March the 2nd. And here's something to understand about our organization, right? Everybody thinks our organization is solely fixated on the Texas vote. And that's true that it is a major campaign for us. But our mission is about the political, cultural, and economic independence of the nation of Texas, right? And so that leads us into a lot of different legislative fights. And imagine our bewilderment after our first legislative engagement started in 2009, that you could buy fireworks for July the 4th. You could buy them for Cinco de Mayo. You could buy them for New Year's, but they were prohibited on Texas Independence Day.
Why?
And it's like, wait a minute. So how is it that this is a thing that we can't even celebrate? Look, I'm neither pro nor anti-firework. Nobody throw anything at me, right? Because you would not believe some of the hostility we got over this. But we said at a minimum, Texans should be able to celebrate Texas Independence Day like they do those other things, right? So, we worked with James White to get the legislation passed, and it was not just for Texas Independence Day. He also threw us another bone and gave us San Jacinto Day too, so go take that, everybody.
Are we having a rally in Austin on March 2nd?
Say again?
Are we having a rally on March 2nd in Austin?
No spoilers. Nothing has been announced yet, but I would say if you are on our email list or show up at our meetings, then you may get a sneak preview of some big actions that are happening in Austin.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question.
Is this a data question? 'Cause-
No, I have a question. However, I was one of those delegates who actually voted for those claims. Although I'm not on your email list, I guess I need to get on it because just about everything you said I agree with. My one question that I have a pause for is I was following and predicting Brexit before it happened. I was
Right.
arguing with friends, they're gonna exit. Oh no, they're not going to. But that was a country with a standing army exiting a very weak union, the European Union, and they negotiated. It was a benign negotiated exit, which is fine with me. I'm glad they did it. Texas, on the other hand, although I agree with everything you said, and I would revel that we would be able to go. Why do you think we could be able to exit the United States like Brexit happened versus the Civil War?
So Civil War question is really about whether or not we live in the 21st century or the 19th century, right? Because things are very different, and it's way too much history to go into as to why it would not be that way. But it really gets down to several factors, right? There's internal domestic pressure, there's international pressure, there's legal precedent that's been set since 1945. I mean, there's a whole lot of different reasons why this doesn't end up in civil war. Now, interestingly enough, if we don't go down this road, the probability of civil war goes much higher, and you wind up with something more akin to balkanization than you get with an orderly exit. So this is our opportunity to have this orderly exit. But look, there are a lot of similarities, oddly enough, between what we're doing and Brexit. But there are also similarities between what we do and sort of the issues that they had in Catalonia or the folks down with MSPI in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The one thing that we know, prior to the foundation of the organization, we did a 2-year-long study of independence movements around the world. Not that it was an intensive 2 years, not that we just started it then, but 2 years intensive, specifically focused on determining what independence movements were doing, whether they were successful, whether they were not, are they on a trajectory for success, and what lessons could be applied to what we needed to do here in Texas. That gave birth to the TNM, okay? And so from that, we looked at all the Eurosceptic movements as a whole, right? Specifically drawing parallels between the European Union and the United States. And interestingly enough, the European Union looks at Washington, D.C. with a tremendous envy. They want that sort of control. They want that sort of power. The end goal, and I think you heard Farage say it plenty, that the end goal for the European Union was to have a United States of Europe. They wanted a European army. I mean, they wanted everything in every respect. So while the European Union is structurally different, I'm pretty sure that the folks in the Eurosceptic movements would disagree that it is a weak union. In fact, the European Union has wound its tentacles into so many of these other countries in very insidious ways. The prediction that they had was that Brexit would go down in flames. You and I are on the right side of history. Matter of fact, one of the people that sits on our advisory board was one of the regional organizers for UKIP and then the Brexit Party. And so we have tons of insight from what happened there. But look, this has got to be this way, right? We have to do the things that we have to do, which means that we have legislation passed that gives us a vote. We win the vote, and then we follow the exit process after that, which is constitutional issues, statutory issues, international covenants, treaties, and agreements, and finally the negotiated issues with the federal government. And we follow that process, then we're in the right. It's theirs to mess up. And if they choose to go down that road, then they also choose to pay the consequences of not having any sort of union with any states in it by the time that it's over with. And that won't be civil war that causes it. That will be other states that look at it and go, wait a minute, so if you're going to put your thumb on us and deny us our right of self-government via economic sanctions, use of force, then Washington, D.C. de facto is no different than Kim Jong-un in North Korea. So states may not even go down the path of having a vote if they were to do that. But that's a whole other topic, and I would just encourage you to either take a look at the book or go to the website at texitnow.org.
I was gonna recommend the book, Texit, an excellent resource.
I'm not here talking books, Doc, but thank you.
I'm knocking it.
Also mention the website and the app.
Yeah, so anyone has any questions about Texit, you can go to texitnow.org. Matter of fact, if you have not already registered your support and you would like to do that today, go do it. There's a QR code over on the table. If you do that, show Kara, she'll give you your free Texit Now sticker. And then be sure to go out there and spread the good word, everyone.
Sir?
I want to thank you, Daniel Miller, for all that you do. I'm a Montgomery County election worker. The apathy in this country is pathetic. We have 6 to 8% turnout in elections in Montgomery County. We had in corporation, we have about 12% turnout. It's pathetic. But the union is broken, and I've asked anybody that will listen to me, what is the way forward for this country? And no one can tell me the way forward. There is none.
Yeah.
There is no
Right.
hope to repair this country.
Can't fix it.
30-some trillion, we're gonna hit $40 trillion in debt. I mean, it's broken. We can send more people to Washington, and they're all rhinos. This is the way forward. I don't see any other way. I grew up in the shadows of the Sanderson Monument, so it's always been in my heart. We made a mistake to join the union. I could ride my bicycle if I could run across the bay to where we won our independence.
Yeah.
But the country's broken, I'm sorry. I mean, this is the way forward.
Well,
My
at least
opinion, of course, is I'm military 3 times. Each time I came out, my heart crushed. We have no leadership. We have no defense. We have no contingencies. We're not ready. We can't even defend our families at the moment if we don't bear arms. So you just said, we better get ready. If we don't text it, it's over with. They're coming. There's nobody gonna protect them.
And don't argue with this guy. He makes his own Italian food.
Let me go ahead.
Piggybacking off that, I
The
wanted
Italian
to,
food part or the...
no,
Okay.
his comment about if we don't text it now, then what? So just a little bit of inside baseball related to the platform. In SD7, we do an entire platform, and we turn that into and I've often thought our SD7 is better than the state one, but I have to admit there are a few good things that come in. But this year, when we went through it, because Texit had a plank in there, and we start with the previous one, so in 2020 we had a plank.
We can almost hear you back there.
And SD7, when we were doing our platform, we did not put forth that plank. And I remember the discussion of it because I have signed on and read the book and would like more collegiality among people that are usually with us. There's with us on so many freedom-loving things. And in that meeting, it was like, well, are you signing on to have war? And you've answered that one. But it was like, if you don't give us the opportunity to vote, then, and you're waiting for something, you're waiting for the opportunity to vote to leave. So I'm a little concerned about this. Okay, so going on the state, somebody stood up at the state platform and read one of those 2 planks and said, does this mean what I think it means?
And the hall just erupted.
Yeah, it does kind of mean that. And
Even Dan Patrick admitted that that was in the Constitution and it was constitutional law.
Yeah.
But that before the Chinese bought him off.
So even among grassroots people that are very for it, we haven't gained impetus to get it a legislative priority. And we can't even get them to pay attention to our legislative priorities. And I feel like this is our last chance, because depending on how this November election goes, we may not have another. So
Right.
I don't know how to phrase that as a question. Is this our last chance, and how do we get it through this time? Because you've been working a long time and it's getting incrementally closer, but I don't feel like we have another decade.
I don't think we have another decade either, but I also don't think we're a decade away. I mean, you know, we're at a critical mass, okay? So let me get all the egg-headed stuff out of the way, and I'll give you the practical answer to what you asked. So the thing to bear in mind here is movements like this take time, right? There's a phenomenal, I mean, I don't even know what you'd call Gene Sharp. Gene Sharp was the author of a document called From Dictatorship to Democracy, which you could argue that points the word democracy in there, but really what the book was about was practical tools for nonviolent, to non-violently displace tyrannical governments, right? Tyrants. And so you've seen Gene Sharp's work in places. One of the most notable, and the one I'm going to highlight, is Serbia. Okay, so when Serbia toppled Milosevic, Sergei Popov, who was the head of the opposition there, he was almost incredulous when he talked about how the media and everyone else looked at when it happened as something that happened overnight. Everyone was surprised. He said, but they ignored all the 10 years of organizing ahead of time, the 5 separate, the nationwide campaigns that they had, all of the things that were necessary to lead up to that moment. Understand that as we move closer to this, they always say the last mile of the marathon is the hardest. It is hard, right? If everything else is set up, this is the last mile of the marathon. So my advice, and what I tell everybody right now, is if it is as urgent as we all believe it is, then you better fight like the third monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark in the rain has started. I mean, this is, but all kidding aside, people, they're going to let that sink in for a while. Sorry about that. But the point here is this, is that many of us on this side of the equation have made this, we've become political hobbyists, right? And what sets us apart, or sets those other movements that we've seen around the world from what's happening here, is they become consumed by it because they have a sense of urgency. Their status quo either starts out as horrible or they're on the verge of a horrendous status quo. Here, we all have the luxury to say, well, man, I go to my little political meetings on Tuesday nights, and then, but most of the time I got to take little Johnny to soccer practice. It's a mindset issue. We cannot, with the sense of urgency as it is, we can no longer be political hobbyists. We have to, not that I am.